Most people think they know a celebrity. They watch them every week on television. They laugh at their jokes. They recognize their voice before they even see their face. America felt exactly that way about Jim Nabors. For years, millions of families sat down on Friday nights and watched him play Gomapile, a sweet, slow-talking, good-hearted Marine from the South who could not do anything right, but somehow made everyone smile anyway. He felt like the most harmless man on television. But the man sitting behind that smile was someone America had never actually met. And the real story of Jim Nabors is so much more surprising, so much more painful, and honestly so much more beautiful than anything people ever saw on their screens. It starts in a small town in Alabama, far from any camera, far from any stage. Sylacauga, Alabama was a quiet marble town sitting about 40 miles southeast of Birmingham. Around 6,000 people lived there in the early 1930s, and one of those families was the Nabors family. Fred Nabors worked as a local police officer. His wife Mavis stayed home with the children. Their youngest child, a boy named James Thurston Nabors, was born on June 12, 1930. From the very beginning, his childhood looked completely different from everyone else around him. The reason was asthma. His attacks were serious and came often, and because of that, young James spent most of his early years stuck inside while other kids ran freely outside. Think about what that does to a child. You are watching the world happen through a window. You can hear the other kids laughing and playing, but you cannot join them. Most children in that situation would simply feel forgotten. But James did something different. He started performing for them. He would stand near the open window and sing to the kids outside. He learned bird calls. He copied mockingbirds. He sang hymns. He made funny voices. Those little window performances became his way of staying connected to a world he could not fully enter. And without knowing it, he was building the two things that would later make him famous. He was finding his singing voice, a rich and powerful sound that kept growing stronger in the church choir every year. And he was developing a slow, high, country voice that made people laugh every single time. Nobody looking at that small sickly boy in Sylacauga would have guessed what was coming. In 1948, he left for the University of Alabama, and here is the first thing most people do not know about him. He did not study music. He did not study acting. He chose business administration. He performed in small fraternity skits mostly just for fun and graduated in 1952 with a degree that pointed toward accounting, not Hollywood. But that path never felt right. After graduation, he moved to New York City and got a job typing for the United Nations. That lasted about a year. The city was too big and too cold. So he moved to Chattanooga, Tennessee, where he worked as a film cutter at a local NBC television station. Eventually, he headed west to Los Angeles and got a job as a film editor at NBC Studios in Burbank. By day, he was cutting footage in a quiet editing room. By night, almost by accident, he was performing at a small cabaret theater on Wilshire Boulevard called The Horn. The Horn was the kind of place where performers got paid in cash and tips, and nobody expected anything polished. And what Jim Nabors was doing there was genuinely strange. He would walk out and open his mouth, and out would come this enormous operatic baritone voice. The kind of voice you expect from a concert hall, not a tiny Los Angeles cabaret. The audience would sit up straight, completely shocked. Then between songs he would speak to them in that slow, high, funny country voice he had been building since childhood. The switch was so sudden and so unexpected that people went from stunned silence to laughing hard within seconds. It was an act that made no logical sense and worked every single time. He was 31 years old with no agent, no manager, and no plan. He made about $50 a week at the Horn and kept his editing job to cover the rest. Then one night in late 1962, everything changed. Bill Dana, a comedian and head writer for The Steve Allen Show, was in the audience and saw the act. He recognized something real in it and put Jim Nabors on national television. Before that broadcast, Jim called his mother from a pay phone to share the news. She asked what he was going to do. He said he was going to sing. According to his own memory, the line went completely quiet. His mother had heard him sing his whole life, but the idea that national television wanted that from this boy who had spent so much of his childhood stuck indoors apparently made no sense to her at all. Soon after, Andy Griffith heard about the act and came to see it himself. Griffith was already one of the biggest stars in America, and was looking for a new comic character for season 3 of his show. He watched the whole performance, went backstage, and told Jim Nabors directly that he was not entirely sure what he had just seen, but he knew it was good. 2 weeks later, CBS called. Jim Nabors was offered a guest role as a gas station attendant named Gomapile. The episode aired in November 1962, and viewer mail started flooding in almost immediately. By his second appearance, audiences were already treating Goma like someone they had known for years. By the end of the season, Andy Griffith had pushed hard enough to make him a regular. From 1962 to 1964, Jim Nabors appeared in 23 episodes of The Andy Griffith Show. Then CBS gave Goma his own series. Gomapile USMC premiered on September 25, 1964, and ran for 5 full seasons. In the 1967 to 1968 season, it ranked 3rd in the entire United States. It finished in the top 10 every year it aired, and in its final season came in 2nd, beaten only by Laugh-In. Jim Nabors had gone from an anonymous film editor, making $50 a night at a tiny cabaret, to one of the most recognized faces in the country. He had gold albums on Columbia Records. Carol Burnett loved him so much she invited him back to open every single season of her show for over a decade because she believed he brought good luck. CBS gave him his own prime-time variety hour. He was at the very top of American entertainment. And that was exactly when it all started to collapse. In either 1970 or early 1971, a couple in Huntington Beach, California sent out invitations for one of their famous house parties. These 2 men were known in Southern California social circles for their large theme parties, always built around an elaborate joke. One year they celebrated the fictional coronation of Queen Elizabeth in Huntington Beach, and everyone arrived dressed for a coronation. Then they sent a new invitation. This one read, "You are cordially invited to the wedding reception of Rock Hudson and Jim Nabors." Inside that private world, among people who understood the context, it was harmless wordplay. Rock Hudson was widely known in the entertainment industry as a closeted gay man. Jim Nabors was understood the same way by people around him. The two were casual friends who had appeared together in public before. There was no romance between them. The entire joke was a pun. Put Rock Hudson together with Gomapile and you get Rockpile. For the people at that party, that was enough. What nobody expected was for one of the guests to take that invitation home and share it with someone who worked at a national fan magazine. The magazine printed a story. Names were not used directly, but the hint was obvious enough. From there it spread fast. A Chicago radio disc jockey added more details. Gossip columns picked it up. By the spring of 1971, rumors were everywhere that Rock Hudson and Jim Nabors had secretly gotten married. The rumor was completely false. There had been no wedding. Same-sex marriage was not legal anywhere in the United States. The 2 men had moved in overlapping entertainment circles, but there had been no romantic relationship between them at all. The damage came fast and hit hard. Jim Nabors gave interviews calling the rumor vicious, unfounded, and unwarranted. He said it felt like a nightmare. When reporters asked directly whether he was gay, he gave the same answer he would keep giving for the next 4 decades. He said he had been so focused on his career that he had not given marriage much thought. He considered suing the magazine, but his manager talked him out of it. A lawsuit would only keep the story alive longer. Rock Hudson made the same decision and blamed the whole thing on people who enjoyed spreading poison. Then the 2 men quietly agreed on something painful. They could no longer be seen together in public at all. Any photograph or appearance side by side would be treated as proof. After the last episode they had filmed together aired, they never spoke again. Not in person. Not by phone. Not at any industry event. For the remaining 14 years of Rock Hudson's life, 2 men who had been friends shared not a single word. Hudson died on October 2, 1985. Jim Nabors did not attend the funeral. That same year, CBS carried out what became known as the Rural Purge. The network canceled a wave of rural-themed programs all at once, including the Beverly Hillbillies, Petticoat Junction, and Green Acres. The Jim Nabors Hour disappeared in the same sweep. CBS said publicly it wanted a more modern image for younger urban viewers. But around the industry, quieter things were said. People whispered that Jim Nabors had become a public relations problem. No document has ever directly proven that the Rock Hudson rumor caused the cancellation. But the timing was impossible to ignore. The rumor had peaked only months earlier. Jim Nabors was 41 years old, and he would never front a major network show again. What he found next surprised even him. In 1972, just 1 year after his show ended, he was invited to sing back home again in Indiana before the Indianapolis 500. He stepped forward, sang a song, and the crowd responded immediately. The Speedway asked him back the next year, and the year after that. It became a tradition nobody had planned and nobody wanted to stop. He sang before the Indianapolis 500 from 1972 all the way to 2014, missing only 1 year due to illness. Across those 42 years, an estimated 300 million cumulative viewers heard his voice at that race. No other performer ever became so closely tied to that single yearly moment. He later said the applause was never really for him, and that it belonged to the song and the race. But people waited specifically for his voice year after year, and that was not an accident. During all of these public years, his personal life stayed completely invisible to most of America. In 1975, during a concert residency in Hawaii, he met a 27-year-old Honolulu firefighter named Stan Cadwallader. The details of their first meeting have never been made fully public. What is known is that the relationship that followed lasted for the rest of Jim Nabors' life. Cadwallader was 18 years younger than him. Over time, Cadwallader left the fire department and began managing Jim's personal and business affairs full-time. They moved in together and stayed together for 38 years. Among friends in the entertainment world and across Hawaii, their relationship was no secret. But the wider American audience, millions of people still watching Gomapile reruns through the 1980s and 1990s, had absolutely no idea. Together they bought a 500-acre farm in Hana on the rural eastern side of Maui. The land produced macadamia nuts and tropical flowers, and Jim became a genuine commercial agricultural producer. The farm gave him something money alone could not buy. It gave him privacy. Hana sits about 3 hours from the Maui airport along a narrow winding road, and that distance alone kept most of the mainland world far away. For a man who had spent a decade as one of the most recognized faces in America, that quiet was not just comfortable. It was necessary. Then in the early 1990s came a moment that nearly ended everything. During a personal vacation to India, Jim wandered through local markets and bought a traditional straight razor from a market stall. Back in his hotel room, he used it to shave and gave himself a small nick. It seemed like nothing. About 2 years later, that tiny moment turned into a crisis. The razor had been contaminated with hepatitis B, and by 1994 the infection had spread far enough that his liver was failing. In an Associated Press interview that year, Jim said he had not even felt truly sick. He had only felt tired. That tiredness sent him to a doctor, and the doctor found his liver was no longer working. He needed a transplant. The waiting list was long, and some accounts placed him near the bottom because of his age. He was 63, and in the early 1990s transplant priority often went to younger patients with better odds of survival. The person who stepped in was Carol Burnett. By her own account and by multiple reports that followed, she personally called donor coordination networks and liver specialists across the country searching for a match. She made the calls. She helped locate the donor. She stood beside him through the entire crisis. The transplant took place in 1994, and Jim Nabors survived. That single act of friendship gave him another 23 years of life. Their bond had started in 1965 and lasted 52 years. After his death, Carol Burnett told The Hollywood Reporter that her heart was heavy. She said she was grateful he had been such a large part of her life. She said she missed him. She said she loved him. Those words carried extra weight coming from someone who had known the private man behind the public smile for more than half a century. On January 15, 2013, just 6 weeks after Washington state legalized same-sex marriage, Jim Nabors and Stan Cadwallader flew from Hawaii to Seattle. They checked into the Fairmont Olympic Hotel and held a small quiet ceremony in their hotel room with a judge and a few close friends. Jim was 82 years old. Stan was 64. They had already been together for 38 years. The next morning Jim gave a short interview to Hawaii News Now. He spoke without drama and without any grand announcement. He said that as a couple they had had no rights, and that after 38 years something had to happen. He said they needed to solidify something. He said he had never made a huge secret of his sexuality, though he had stayed quiet because it was personal. He said he had not gone around telling people. He said he had been very happy to have a partner of 38 years and that he felt very blessed. That was how Jim Nabors came out to the country he had entertained since 1962. No dramatic press conference. No carefully planned announcement. He got married in a Seattle hotel room, answered a few quiet questions the next morning, and said he was happy. The reaction across America was overwhelmingly warm. There were no boycotts, no protests. The shows stayed in syndication. The Marine Corps did not strip him of his honorary commission. The Indianapolis Motor Speedway welcomed him back in 2013 and again in 2014. Fans who had loved Gomapyle for half a century simply kept on loving him. For years Hollywood had treated that kind of truth like a career-ending threat. Rock Hudson had once feared it so deeply that he cut off a friendship entirely to protect himself. But by 2013 that fear had lost its hold. Jim Nabors had lived long enough to reach a country that had quietly changed around him. He sang at the Indianapolis 501 final time on May 25, 2014. He was 83 years old. The crowd was the largest in the event's modern history to that point. His voice still carried that same richness people had waited for every year since 1972. When he finished, he waved and stepped away. He never sang in public again. On November 30, 2017, at his home in Honolulu with Stan Cadwallader beside him, Jim Nabors died at the age of 87. Stan released a short statement. He said everyone knew his husband had been a wonderful man. He said his husband was going to be dearly missed. Within the hour, the United States Marine Corps posted a tribute that read, Semper Fi, Gomapyle. Rest in peace, Jim Nabors. America thought it knew him. They thought they knew that slow smile and that funny voice and that big gentle character on their television every Friday night. What they were actually watching was a man with a business degree, a hidden operatic voice trained from years of childhood illness, and a private life he protected for decades in a country where simply being who he was could cost him everything. The innocence on screen was crafted. The simplicity was a performance. The man behind it, according to everyone who truly knew him, was reserved, gentle, deeply serious about his work, privately devoted to opera, and extraordinarily careful about everything the public ever saw of him. He was not the man America thought he was. He was something far more complicated, far more private, and in the end, far more worth knowing.